So I've spoken a lot about the things that I ended up doing post-divorce that really helped me in the roads to recovery. That's not to say that I did everything right. In fact, far from it. In fact, when I look back now, there's certain things that I did or just mindsets that I had that, quite frankly, I find embarrassing because it's not who I see myself as, and it's not how I want to be. But let's face it, it's not like, we read what to expect when your life suddenly implodes before all of this happened to prepare ourselves. We're doing the best we can with what we have in the moment. And at that time, it's sometimes not very good. And that's okay. So I'm going to start today just by sharing some of the ways that I screwed up, some of the mistakes that I made, some of the things that if I was to do this again, please God, no, but if I was going to do this again, what I would do differently. One of the biggest mistakes that I made that really cost me a lot of time, meaning just that I think it delayed my healing the most, was putting my faith in external sources, really thinking that I needed something or someone outside of myself to be the one to fix things. And the target of that kind of changed throughout time. It started focusing on, my then husband. I thought that I needed his apology. I thought that I needed to talk to him. I really thought that I needed those things in order to heal. And then when it became clear that that wasn't happening, then I thought, okay, I need him to face the consequences. I put all my hope in the court system, both criminal and family courts, thinking that I needed them to make everything okay. And then when that didn't happen, then I put my faith in the calendar, thinking about, okay, if I just get to this 1 year point, then I'll be okay. That didn't happen. So then I kind of shifted and both distracted myself by dating way too soon, but also kind of putting my well-being in their hands. It was like, if they can make me feel okay, if they can validate me, then I'm okay, then I'm worthy, because of all of that, lack of confidence and low self-esteem and all of that happens when we are rejected. So I was like, okay, if these other guys can find me, desirable and attractive, then I am. When none of that really helped. From this perspective now, those are all, superficial things. And the truth is that none of those things could really make me feel okay. None of those things could ease that pain of rejection. None of those things could bring back my confidence. None of those things would take away the pain. Really, the only way that could happen was one, time, and then two, my own inner work. But because I was so focused on all of those external things, it took me longer than I wish it had to really start to look at the things that I could control. And another mistake that I made, and I know that this sounds a little bit strange, but I took my then husband's actions way too personally. I just saw him as like this malevolent monster plotting to do all these things, this deliberate, actions that he had taken over years is how I saw it. And that I was this victim, that I was this, innocent caught in the crossfires. And the problem with all of that, it was this very kind of black and white thinking, which, if you've been on this earth for any length of time with any sense of awareness, you realize that very few things are actually absolutes. And so I've noticed in myself that when I get into that absolute mindset, it's usually me kind of getting in this like either self-protective place or kind of a like defensive place. And that's how this kind of thing was. I needed to protect myself from anything that I might have done wrong, from any part that I had played, not in his betrayal, not in his infidelity. That's all on him to own, but on the part that I played in the marriage, the part that I played choosing him to begin with, the part that I played in ignoring some of like his childhood patterns, where I just sort of brushed those aside, and my own childhood patterns that I didn't pay attention to. And so, kind of in that defensive posture, I took everything that he did as this personal affront, as this was all done to me. And it wasn't accurate, first of all, but it also, again, delayed my healing, because it made me angry, because I was seeing him again as that monster. And it also meant that it took longer for me to really see myself in an authentic way. And really, a lot of it was ego talking, of assuming that I must have been the center of his world in some way, that I was so, worth all of his attention, that all of these things obviously had to have been done because of me or deliberately to me. And what I've come to realize over time is really, I think he was doing all of these things in an attempt to escape his own pain, and that he didn't so much as do them to me, but he did them despite of me. That it wasn't that he was thinking so much of me, it's that he really wasn't thinking about me that much at all. And then once I was able to kind of let go of some of that defensive posture, and let that ego feel bruised and just let it be, I was really able to dig in quite a bit deeper and uncover quite a bit more on kind of understanding why some of this happened. Which leads me to my next mistake, which was all about that trying to understand why. I went crazy into like detective mode. It's a little wild going back and thinking about it. I mean, it truly was an obsession. The amount of time that I spent online trying to find any evidence that I could. The amount of time I spent looking up his other wife. I paid for a background check on her. I mean, all of these things that were done with this like frenetic energy that I had. It was my drug in those first few months. I needed to keep searching for all of these facts because I thought that they were so important. And I mean, I actually just recently, this is kind of sad, at the end of all of this, I had bags of evidence for whatever that's worth, and USB drives and all of this. And just relatively recently, I had to go into that big old bucket of all my divorce crap. And for a very specific reason, I had to go through all of those papers. And I finally purged a lot of those facts, a lot of those things that I had dug up that have never meant anything. And all of that I call a mistake. When it was wasted energy, it was energy that could have been put in much better places. It was another one of those distractions. I mean, I can see it now. It was a lot easier for me to dig into that evidence than it was to dig into myself and to really feel that pain and that loss that I was experiencing and the fear. It was such a feeling of not being in control. And so by finding all of those facts, by being the detective, I felt like, oh, this is something that I can control. This is things that I can do. It's like I was arming myself with, a sense of being the one who could control the outcome of all of this. I was now the one in the know. It was kind of my sense. But it was all, false sense of security. And then the other part of it is once you know those things, you can never unknow them. Now, in my particular case, because we're not still together, that's less damaging than it is for those of you that are rebuilding things with your partner after they've cheated. But that's not to say that it's not still damaging. Learning about all of the times in our married life where I thought one thing was happening and then I come to find out it was actually something completely different. Well, that's damaged years of memories that used to be sweet, are now just filled with question and kind of some bitterness that I've been working on over time. But I don't really need to have all of that in my mind. I don't need to have kind of that. I almost think of it as like dual screens playing. I have this one screen in my mind that plays the memory from my perspective, all of those happy moments. But then now there's that other screen playing right next to it that is the evidence that I found that shows that something else was really going on behind the scenes. And I wish that I hadn't discovered all of that, because now that it's just memories, it would be nice if I could just have the pleasant television playing and just shut off that other one. But it doesn't work that way, sadly. All right, couple more mistakes I made. And this one, I don't know if this one's kind of more unique to my particular situation because it was so crazy, or if maybe some other of you can identify with this as well. I got a little hooked on the drama of it all. I don't know what else to call it. When this all happened 2 weeks before the start of the school year, I was a teacher at that point. And when I got back to school, everybody knew. It was in the news. There was no hiding it. And, everybody would ask me every day about, what's the new information? Because in the beginning there was, like new stuff coming to light every day. And it was dramatic. I was kind of like the days of their lives. And I got kind of addicted to that, I guess, almost. Just kind of fed on some of that energy of it. And it's strange because I've never done that before about anything, and I haven't done that since. But just in that moment, I got kind of caught up in all of that. And the only reason I could think of that it had that energy behind it was, again, some of that distraction. It felt way better of, like kind of being this, I don't know, expose writer almost about all of this stuff that was happening than it did like being in my own body, being the one to live it. It kind of let me get a little more distance from it, I guess, a little more third person perspective. And it also kind of kept me from being pitied, because if I didn't pay attention to the drama part of it, then everyone really was aware of that loss, and that's including me. And I didn't want to feel that, and I didn't want others to feel sorry for me. And so I kind of kept that drama going to kind of hide the pain. I guess, in a way, it's kind of like a lot of comedians or, comics, comedic actors. A lot of them deal with, a lot of depression and all of that. And they put on this happy face and this kind of persona because that's how they want to be perceived. And it kind of distances themselves from that other side. And I think that's some of what I was doing at that point. All right. And then finally, the last mistake that I made that I can think of right now was I discounted the effect that this would have on me long term. I absolutely was aware of kind of that acute pain. And I had fears in the beginning of, am I ever going to learn to be able to trust again? But I got to a point where I was like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. I've got this stuff down. But I really didn't give enough attention to how deep some of these wounds are and how they can come up again at, kind of the most surprising and frankly inopportune times. It's still weird sometimes where I'll kind of feel emotional about something or overreact to something. And when I kind of take some time and sit with it and I realize what's really underneath it, so often it's all of those things surrounding my divorce or even childhood stuff, childhood abandonment issues that were triggered by the divorce. And it's all just so wrapped up together. And I wish that I had been more aware of that, kind of not necessarily in those, early months, not during the survival time. That wasn't the time, but kind of in those first few years. I really kind of saw like, oh, this is, before and after, and I'm in this after time now. And it's not so clear cut. It's one of those things that does stay with you to some extent. And I keep learning and keep getting better. And I hope that continues. All right. So real quick, I have to redeem myself. I can't leave just with the ways that I screwed up. I got to also share some of the things that I did right. And a lot of these were kind of instinctive. Some of these were probably from growing up with a mom who was a counselor. And some of these, I will be honest, were just happy accidents. So one of the best things that I did was I was so careful to surround myself with people. I knew from the very beginning that if I lived by myself, not only could I not afford it, but that if I lived by myself, that I would isolate, that I would kind of retreat. And I knew that wasn't healthy for me. And so I reached out. Actually, she volunteered. Let me scratch that. She volunteered to take me in, a dear, dear friend of mine. And I lived with her and her family for that first year. And that was invaluable. But it wasn't just her. I had all of my coworkers. I made new friends. I had so many friends like during that first year that since we've just kind of distanced from each other. No falling out, just different places in life. But I made sure to have so many people around me, many of whom knew what was going on and were supportive, some who had no idea what I was going through because they were new into my life and I needed them just as much. I just needed life and energy around me. And I'm so glad that I did that. Another thing that I did right, and this was a big first for me, was I asked for help. I had never been good at asking for help, but this was one of those times when I knew I had no choice. I knew that if I was going to make it, I needed help. And so I asked for help, everything from asking those friends to help make sure that I was eating, to asking my doctors for help, to seeing a psychiatrist and getting on medication, to talking to my boss at work, to alert her to what was going on. I made sure that I had help around me. Another smart thing that I did was I set goals. And I called it my goalpost, actually. I typed out a list of 12 goals. And some of them were really big goals, like leave my job and move across the country level. Others of them were so tiny. Things like learn to cook one gluten-free meal. But I needed kind of that broad range because I needed things that felt doable. Because quite frankly, even that cooking one meal, that took me, I'm trying to think, that was 5 months. It took me 5 months to be able to make that meal. All the way to the things that felt utterly impossible. And I had those goals and I posted them up above my computer, which remember was the computer that I sat at obsessively Googling my ex and his wife. So I was there a lot. But I put these goals right above that computer to where I could see them all the time. And I took notes on that page, notes about my progress on those goals, put a big check mark off when I reached one. And that was really good for me because it gave me kind of that focus of reminding me that there was life after all of this, because this was during all of that legal garbage. And it's like, I'm not just my divorce. I am these other things too. My life isn't over. That I can still achieve and accomplish and do and experience these new things. And those goals just kept that front and center. So another good thing that I did was actually in response to one of the mistakes that I made. So remember that obsessive Googling and researching and playing detective? Well, I didn't like the fact that I was doing that. I felt out of control. Like I said, it was my drug and I needed to go cold turkey. And so that's what I did. I made a hard boundary with myself. I told myself I will look the day after the divorce was final and I will not look again. And that has been, over 13 years now. And I am proud to say I have not ever looked again. People will ask me sometimes where he is and what he's doing. And it feels really good to say, I don't know, because it doesn't matter to me. And so setting that hard boundary was something that I really needed to do for me. I recognized that what I was doing wasn't healthy for me, that it wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go. And I knew that if I tried to just cut it down, I knew that it wouldn't work. Again, it was like that addiction. If I had just a little bit, I knew I was going to be all in. So I just had to cut it out completely. All right, I've got two more. Another thing that I did that I'm so glad that I did, and I have no idea where this came from, but I really worked hard to avoid absolutist thinking when it came to the future. And if other people used it with me, I pretty emphatically would shoot them down. And here's what I mean by that absolutist thinking is things like all men are cheaters. I will never find love again. All of those things that is like that absolute, this is never going to happen, or everyone is this way, that broad brush kind of thing. And even though I was seeing my ex's behaviors kind of in that black and white way that I mentioned, I really limited that to him. I didn't expand that to everybody else. And I really think that that was key in where I am now. Because if you tell yourself this is never going to happen, or all people are like this, that's the lens then that you're seeing the world through. And that's also the energy then that you tend to attract. And so I think by just kind of leaving that door open of saying, I don't know what's going to happen. And, sometimes saying this is hard, like when it comes to the trust. I don't know how I'll be able to trust again. It wasn't, I will never trust again. It's, I worry about it. This is going to be something that I know is a struggle, but I'm curious about it. I wonder how this is going to work. And so just kind of that trying to keep an open mind. And then finally, the last thing that I did that I really think helped is that I was relentless in my search for various tools that would help. And I was also ruthless when it came to eliminating those tools when they were no longer effective. So by tools, what I mean is things like journaling, things like counseling, things like medication, things like running, just all of those things that we use to try to heal ourselves. And, at various points, I found that different things were needed. And at some point, some of them were no longer effective. And it didn't make sense for me to continue to take time and energy and put it into those things when they weren't getting me any benefit that I needed. So I hope that this has given you maybe some ideas of what to do and not do, and maybe some compassion for yourself if you feel like you're making mistakes or like you made mistakes in the past. Again, we're all just doing the best that we can. This is not the kind of thing that you can ever prepare for. You might think you know what you would do, but you don't, not until you're there. And none of us is at our best when we are grieving, when we are in pain, when we are confused. So be gentle on yourself and be gentle on each other.